Hey, happy Sunday. This is PFG Live, and I'm Spencer Webb, and you're not. Welcome aboard. We have a good crew. Let's see. In the chat, in Discord, we have Josh, Dale, Jeff, Wesley, Michael Juan, Evils, Carl Tauber, Adam. I'm trying to go for three Adams. Harvey, Bill, Arstead, Retrofit, and Chris O. Welcome aboard, guys. And we have checking in from Laramie, Wyoming Regional. RJ's Workshop reports that the winds are a 13 gusting 20, visibility 10 miles, clear, temperature 06, dew point -10, altimeter 3017. Welcome aboard. Art That Makes Art says it's 57 and sunny in south central Idaho, where the potatoes are starting to grow. Andrew, no, we got Lewis here. Lewis Brooks says, greetings from Glasgow, Scotland, where it's 13 degrees science. Welcome aboard, Lewis. Andrew Deere says it's 55 degrees Frankenstein and raining again in Independence, Oregon. Welcome. And over on the Discord, Evils grabbed a Bundaberg, has a constant standard temperature in his shop. Bill Olney from Rome, New York says it's 41 and 12 miles an hour winds. Michael Juan says it's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's rainy with 6 degrees C. That sounds chilly. Chris O in Los Angeles, California says it's 75 degrees Frankenstein and sunny. Welcome aboard, sir. Not terribly far away in Santa Rosa, California. Harvey Newman checks in with 55 degrees Fahrenheit and foggy. Dale, in the great northwest part of America's top hat, it says it's 15 degrees centigrade in Edmonton, Alberta. Josh says the audio is check in South Manitoba. Welcome, sir. Where it is, let's see. Winds are 020 at 14 knots, temperature 01, dew point -06. Remarks are, you had peak winds of 19 knots. Okay, that's not that crazy. Arstead says it's 48 degrees Fahrenheit and partly sunny in Peoria, Illinois. Welcome aboard, Peoria. Carl Tauber, our in-house chemist, reports 48 degrees and trying to rain in the People's Republic of Rhode Island. Welcome, Carl. I think we got everybody. Here in Windham, New Hampshire, right now, it is 50 degrees Frankenstein. Winds are out of the northwest at 5 miles an hour. And the Manchester Airport reports calm, 10-mile visibility, few clouds at 400, overcast 8,000. Temperature 09, dew point 07, altimeter 2974. The remarks are unimportant. Adam from South Dakota, USA, 57 degrees Frankenstein. Thank you. Welcome aboard. And I happen to know the other Adam is with us, but I don't. Can we get a weather report from Western Mass there, Adam? I'm getting messages from my sister. Hi, Jackie. She's not watching. So, Adam says, stand by. We're going to get the full. When Adam Brunette says, stand by, you know something's coming. So we'll about to get a weather report. Adam's going to weigh in today also because I've been bugging him all morning about some of these 3D printing questions. He is my one of my absolute experts in 3D printing. So I always go to him with questions. And we had a little chat this morning. So, a couple of topics, a couple of things going on. Adam reports currently 45.9 degrees Fahrenheit, wind direction 310 at 4.7 miles an hour in Western Mass, not terribly far from the intersection of Central Mass. Okay, sorry, Central Mass. Right off the pike, as we say here in the Great Northeast. Busy week with, we got projects in the lab, which I can't show you, but they're moving along. Let me tell you, having 3D printers How's this for a segue? Having 3D printers at your disposal for making jigs and fixtures, especially when you're inventing something that you've never done before, is really good. Let me just say that out loud. You know, you come up with an idea, you're trying to do something. It's like, how do I hold this thing so I could do this while this is happening? And you like, oh, and you come up with a fixture and you run downstairs and you print it, and then you get on with life. So it's been a lot of that. Kyle Gibbons says it's rainy. It's amazing. Let's see. Practical Renaissance says Jeff reports 46 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with a breeze in wonderful Kansas City, Missouri. Would you wave at my my relatives over in across the river? Greenwood AG says it's 55 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny with light winds in south central Idaho. We have 2 Idahoans here this morning. Welcome aboard. Practical Renaissance waves. I'm waving back. We're waving at each other now. Yeah, they're in St. Louis. I have relatives in St. Louis, so I've been in your backyard. So 3D printing is one of our topics today. Then we're going to talk a little follow up on our infrared temperature measurement and imaging stuff. Interesting stuff that we learned. And then I'm going to talk about a topic that is you either love it or you hate it. and that's ChatGPT. Because I find that a lot of people use it properly, and a lot of people don't understand its use and use it improperly to their negative results. So I want to talk about that a little bit and put it in perspective. I did something this week which used ChatGPT to good effect, and you're going to see the results of that. And I'm not going to tell you ahead of time, but you'll see the results of that, and then we'll talk about it. Okay? Let's see. Something's resonating in here. I don't know if it's me. Oh, it might be picking up my headphones. So I have switched to the in the Bambu printers, which you saw last week. I switched to the textured PEI plate. And for those of you who are a big fan of the Bambu printers, you probably thought I was going to talk about the new H2D. I am not. So I think I mentioned this last week. I don't think I'm a candidate for that printer quite yet. I'm still using the X1C carbon to good effect. And as you know from last week, we just added a 4th one, and we created what we call the 3D printing module. See last week's PFG.Live. And as a result of that, we switched to the textured PEI plate, which Bambu is now shipping as the standard plate. So just to give you a little background, the original standard plate was what they called the engineering plate. The engineering plate had one side which was powder-coated steel, and I hear your telepathic message, Adam. And the other side was a what they called the cool plate. It was PEI, but it was smooth, and it was not rated for high temperatures. So I started printing the trays for the PFG Stones on the engineering plate. So the trays, the lids, all that stuff were done on the engineering plates. And naturally, as time went on, I was, maybe got a couple of scratches, and it was a relatively smooth plate. So if you got a scratch in the plate, it would show up in the print. And so if I got a scratch plate, I changed it out. So I bought a couple of extra ones. Well, they discontinued, tell me if this sounds familiar, they discontinued the engineering plate. Well, Adam, who just joined us, Adam B, was using the engineering plate also for a TPU project, and it was like the only plate that was working for him. So he's treating these things like, rare commodities. Well, along comes the new printer, the number 4 printer, and it came with the textured PEI plate. So I said, well, let me experiment with this. Most of my printing is in PETG, and I did some experiments, and it was very positive. That plate was working great on PLA. That plate was working great on PETG. Interestingly, I noted that when I did PLA prints, such as the, let's see if I have a picture of this. Yeah, I do. The desiccant cylinders, which I stick in the middle of my spools, pictured here, those are just straight PLA. When I printed those, they printed great on that. Dale posted a picture for you, Adam, of 2 engineering plates. He says $1,000, no lowballers. I know what I got. You're awesome. So the PLA prints would print beautifully on the textured PEI, and then when it cooled down, Carl, that's Adam Brunette. We have to use full names now. That is not Adam Booth, and it's not Adam Balog, and it's not the other Adam who is currently in the Discord. So we're up to at least 4 Adams. We might have more. I lost count. So the PLA prints, you'd reach in to grab the PLA print and kind of yank it off the bed, and it was just sitting there like it was sitting on a shelf. No adhesion, which was actually kind of nice. Then I started observing that the PETG prints. Oh, Adam Demuth, of course. We're up to 5 Adams now. Good job. Collect them all. So the PETG prints were sticking pretty well. Like, they were still stuck at the end of the print. I let them cool overnight so that they're literally at, call it 60 degrees, and they're still stuck. Upon peeling or releasing the PETG prints, there's the worst one there, I would get a blush. I would get this white blush on the print. And from my research, that's literally damage to the polymer when you're yanking the print off the bed. So I was talking to Dale, and who's in the Discord, and Dale said that he's been using the Bambu PVA glue. Now they call it, because I'm going to have a rant coming, they call it a 3D printing adhesive. They don't say that it's PVA, but it's PVA. Now PVA stands for Polyvinyl Acetate. And for you organic chemists, and you know who I'm looking at, Carl, it also stands for polyvinyl alcohol. Thank you. Polyvinyl alcohol. But really, they're not the same thing, and we're talking about polyvinyl acetate. Who here knows what Elmer's glue is? You've heard of Elmer's glue, okay? Elmer's glue is polyvinyl acetate. And, old-time 3D printer guys made their own PVA, white glue, school glue, wood glue, all correct. Thank you very much, Evils. And old-time 3D printer guys would make their own, and they would spread it on the plate. So I got really confused about this stuff, because this stuff did a great job acting as a release agent. Okay, so if you look at the picture, the the lids that are on the left side are perfectly gorgeous, clean, and wonderful. The lids that are on the right side are showing a little bit of that white blush. The ones on the left were printed with a little bit of PVA on the bed. So it's a release agent, but it's a glue. So Carl says that Elmer's has alcohol as well as acetate. Interesting. Okay, so Elmer's is some formulation. Dale is posting a pic right now in the Discord server. His remind me, is that was PLA? Was that straight PLA? PETG. So Dale was running PETG and he was having adhesion problems. So he went to using a little bit of the PVA and he got more adhesion. You see where this is going? So the question I had was, wait a minute, are you telling me the same stuff is being used as a release agent, sometimes called a mold release, and it's being used as an adhesive in the same world? And the answer is apparently yes. And it's kind of crazy. So I had never used PVA on the beds of my 3D printers, never needed it, never wanted it, didn't want to get involved. And then in the last 48 hours, I did this experiment, and I am now convinced that I do need to be using it with the textured PEI plate. It is not difficult. Here's my process. I take the textured PEI plate. I take this very container of glue. By the way, this Bambu product is a good product, and Dale uses it also. Dale's showing a picture without the glue, which was a complete release and crash and burn. I think you recovered from that one, didn't you? This is a very nice product that Bambu sells. I am led to believe that this was also made by other manufacturers and that they're labeling it. But it doesn't matter. It's a good product. I think it's $16. After I tell you what I'm about to tell you, you will realize that this is a 4-year supply right here. So I take the PEI plate clean. So it's a clean plate. Frequently, I will wipe it down with IPA, not the beer, isopropyl alcohol. And then I will take this and I will make the letter N on the plate, just like zip, zip, zip on the plate. Maybe about 4 or 5 inches tall letter N on the plate. That's it. Bambu shows a video of how to use this stuff where some magnificent artist coats the entire plate carefully, swath by swath, until the whole thing is evenly coated. You do not need to do that. After you make the letter N on the plate, you then take a Kim wipe. I like Kim wipes because they don't have lint. I take a Kim wipe, a little bit of IPA, and then I use it over the whole plate. And what we're doing is we're spreading the PVA very thin using the Kim wipe with the IPA. Almost everything I just said was transmitted to me from Dale, who was having great success with this. I did that, and then I did my tests, and the last of the tests is what you're seeing on your screen. The new ones are perfect. I actually published a couple of videos to the Discord server showing the initial checks when I opened the printers. So for me, I'm using the PVA in a very tiny amount on the structure, on the textured PEI plate, and it is acting as a mold release for PETG. Well, then I started asking guys, because I know I'd heard that it was used as an adhesive to increase the adhesion to the plate, and I looked for examples of that, and I got a couple of examples of that. So I then did a little research, and here's what I found. Let's put up the whiteboard here. Here's a list of filaments, and here's the ones that have improved adhesion, and here's the ones that have improved release. Interestingly, there is crossover, and this is the best part. So, for example, top line PLA, improved adhesion, yes. Improved release, no. Go down to PETG, okay? It says improved adhesion, no. Improved release, yes. So we don't have any no and no's, but we have a couple of yes and yeses. PET, which is a close relative of PETG, is a yes and yes for adhesion and release. Polycarbonate is a yes and a yes. I think that's the only ones that are double yeses. So my conclusion here is that PVA is useful as both a dessert topping and a floor wax, as a release agent and an adhesion helper. And I have a problem with calling it a 3D printing adhesive, or we keep calling it PVA glue, and I would prefer to just, give it a different name. So we could have a name contest here. Okay, so Jeff says the Quiddy, QIDI texture PEI plate is somehow different then, ? After about 5 kilometers of PETG, I have no adhesion issues. And if I let the plate cool to 40 C or less, things are auto-released. Okay, so I was sort of in the same boat. Yes, I'm going to get there, Proteum. Thanks for reminding me. I was sort of in the same boat with the engineering plate. Just never used anything, and it did exactly what you're talking about. It was a great job. So here's the message. Well, actually, let me cover one more thing, because then I'm going to come back to address what you just said. So Proteum says it's worth noting, switching from cleaning the plates with isopropyl to Dawn and hot water gave us buttery smooth release. Jeff says +1 on Dawn. Use PVA glue only for your PAHT glass filled or safe. Okay, so, and I talked to Adam Brunette, who's here, and he also recommend, if you want a clean PEI plate, soap and water. And in my world, in others' world, that means Dawn dishwasher soap, dishwashing soap. Carl says glop is a good name for an adhesive. I think we need to call it a conditioning material, because it's both, and we shouldn't just call it an adhesive. So PVA is water soluble. Carl, you're authorized to hit me over the head if I say something stupid here. So PVA is water soluble, and soap and water is going to do a good job of cleaning it off. PVA is not really isopropyl soluble, but we use it as a way to spread it around. You following? So you have a way to clean PVA off the plate, soap and water, okay? You have a way to add more PVA to the plate, PVA, and spread it around with isopropyl. So now you have control. You can go more or less, and it's actually pretty fine control. Carl, our resident chemist, is going to join us. Let's see if we get you in here. Carl, you are on the air. Welcome. Rhode Island, you're on the air.
Thank you. Just a comment that when you're talking about PVA, it's a bit confusing because it could be either polyvinyl alcohol or polyvinyl acetate.
Right.
And and there can be mixtures. And the mixture can be, you have added or mixed polyvinyl alcohol with polyvinyl acetate, or you have taken polyvinyl acetate and hydrolyzed some of the acetate groups, leaving behind the vinyl alcohol groups. In other words, an ester, which is what this is a bonded together carboxylic acid and an alcohol. And in this case, the alcohol is part of the backbone, and the acetate can be hydrolyzed away and flushed out. So you can actually have a copolymer of polyvinyl acetate with polyvinyl alcohol. And that's part of the problem with talking about stuff like Elmer's, because we don't really know what they're doing.
True.
And, the product that you have from Bambu, we're not certain we know what they're doing either, unless they're a lot more candid than Elmer's are.
They're not.
So, okay. So anyway, that I just wanted to make clear that the two moieties are, to my knowledge, the polyvinyl alcohol is more water soluble than the polyvinyl acetate. But again, there are issues of how it was polymerized, what is the average molecular weight, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So that at least at my level of knowledge, I'm not competent to make a blanket statement about which is which.
When you talk about what the molecular weight is that the same as saying what the length of the polymer chains is?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It's the number of subunits. And they, sometimes it's listed as a polymerization number.
Okay.
In other words, 50 subunits, 500 subunits, whatever. Or it can be given in, grams per mole.
Okay. So let me ask you this. I have this mental model of for the improved adhesion case. I have this mental model of the expansion and contraction of the metal plate, of the build plate, and the expansion and contraction of the part is somewhat being accommodated by the PVA material, because it's able to have a little give, and that's a result of it being a polymer and being able to stretch a little bit mechanically. Is that a valid picture?
Potentially, yes, but it varies considerably with the nature of the polymer. Like Mylar film, which is polyethylene terephthalate, or PET, has very little extensibility. In other words, it's really stiff in tension.
Mm-hmm.
Other polymers are less so. So you're really down in the nitty gritty of the properties of the polymer in question.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may well be, your view may be a very good way of looking at the problem. But I can't tell you that from again, from my level of knowledge, which is, I'm not by any means an expert in any of these areas.
Hang on,
worked a little bit.
You just earned one of these.
I am not an expert.
Okay, go ahead.
I've done some work synthesizing urethanes and acrylics before most of the audience was born. And I had a good one-on-one training with the technical manager of that company, who was a former DuPont chemist of impeccable pedigree. But nobody would consider me to be a polymer chemist, and I'm not by any means up to date on what what's going on in the 3D printing world.
If I stand next to you, you will look a lot more like a polymer chemist. Trust me, because I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well, you actually do have more idea than your because you have the practical experience.
So,
It's good that you played Robin saying I'm not an expert, and he may not be an expert, but he's thought deeply about a lot of these subjects, and he has great experience. So, compared to me, I have not worked with any of these things. So that
so just shooting from the hip, I have a question for you. Shooting from the hip. If you have one of these plates, these polyether imide PEI plates, and you want to clean it, I'm claiming that the PVA, polyvinyl acetate, not being soluble in water in alcohol, but being soluble in water, indicates a soap and water wash to clean the plate. If I handed you one of these plates and I told you that I need this plate clean, would you just do soap and water wash? Would you do soap and water wash followed by an alcohol wipe? What would you do? What would be the best procedure to start?
Well, what I would do is I would do what we call a crock test, which is you take something like a Q-tip and dip it in some alcohol and rub it on the plate, not all over the plate, but in a restricted area. And you do the same thing with the water alone, with soap and water, and you see what is effective and what is not effective. I can't predict a priori, and you really have to do the experiment and the crock test, where you look at little areas near each other, gives you very good information. It's a typical test that's used on paint. If you want to make sure that you don't damage your paint film, you do a crock test. Or if you want to find something that will remove your paint film, you do a crock test.
Okay. Cool. How do you spell that? CROC? CRO?
To my knowledge, it's CROCK.
Okay. So we could look that up and learn something.
Yeah. It's a very common thing with with paint samples and so forth that you or fabrics for that matter, to determine what is going to draw color from the fabric.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Carl, thanks as always, for the expertise, and we'll appreciate it and incorporate it into our knowledge, our collective knowledge.
There's one other thing that I want to add while I'm here. The polyvinyl acetate is an ester, but the ester linkages are not part of the backbone. The backbone of polyvinyl acetate is very much more like an acrylic, and it's going to be highly waterproof. So you don't necessarily have to worry about drying the material the way that you would with PETG. You still have to do the experiment, but the point is you're not going to break the backbone. You may hydrolyze some of the stuff on the side, but that's going to have, not going to damage the properties of the polymer as much. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you. I have so much additional studying to do now. Thank you, Carl. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Take care. Well, that was awesome. Protium is reporting that he switched. What did he say? Protium says he stopped having to use PVA by switching to Dawn and water over isopropyl alcohol. So did that... Okay, and that gave you the release you were seeking, so to speak. Don't hold me to that. That was solving a release problem, Protium, or an adhesion problem? I want to just clarify that. All right, with a little lag here. There he goes. Release problem. Okay, he solved a release. Okay, here's my point. you have the knobs to turn in your own system, and you could perform the experiment. You could wash it in soap and water. You could wipe it with isopropyl alcohol. You could do both. Okay. You could add more or less PVA. The point being is if you start with a quote clean plate and you get too much adhesion, you could add some of the PVA. And if you added very lightly, you can get to the point of a better release. That's my claim. Okay. I don't know, with the soap and water, if you do a very clean release, a very clean rinse job, I would imagine that you're going to get more adhesion. You're observing that you're getting better release. This is very interesting. Adam, do you have anything you want to jump in on this? Because I know we talked about this morning, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. You're on the air.
How you doing?
Good. How are you? Long time
Can you hear me?
speak. Yes,
Yep.
I hear loud and clear.
I know. Let's see if we can get the camera working.
Oh, we'll even give you video. Let's see. So my question for you, Adam, is now that you've heard all of this stuff, what's your story on the use or non-use of PVA?
So I've only used an additive. We'll call it an additive for now. You're looking for a term.
I like that term. Okay.
I've only used it twice in my printing career. So as I was telling you earlier, on my custom built printer, which has a glass bed, I could not get anything to stick to that. I put the Bambu stuff, the same stuff you showed, put that down. Everything worked great after that. So that was my first time actually ever using it. And then recently I was working on some engineering parts made out of ASA, very, very small contact area with the bed. And this is where the engineering plate came in. They needed to have a very uniform, not texture, so the texture plate wouldn't work. They had to be very smooth. They had about 1.3 or 1.4 millimeters of surface contact with the bed. Okay. Could not get it to work on anything. I went to the engineering plate. ASA almost does not stick to that plate in its natural state. It doesn't matter how hot you heat it. All my ASA is done at 110 C on the bed. I put that additive on the bed, and you almost can't pry them off the bed, even after the fact. Seriously. You have to take a straight razor and scrape them off the bed very carefully, but they come out perfect almost every time because they're an inverse cone shape. Mm-hmm. So with kind of like the flat on them. So that's why they have to be printed that way. Mm-hmm. Or else they get into support material and post processing, and then profit goes out the window, Yeah. So until I did that was like my last ditch effort. Until I put that additive on that engineering plate, I would average about 20% yield out of a print plate. So yeah, so I was doing between I think I had it set up for 25 on a build. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was getting like 4. Like, wow. If it didn't rip them off sooner than that. Yeah. And then once I did go to it, I could get all 25 every shot. So, and I'm doing hundreds of these. So like, it has to be reliable. So that's okay. So there's a concrete example, if you'll pardon the pun, of using the additive for adhesion. Mm-hmm. So that's a really, really good example. So, and the other example that I gave you on the large glass bed printer was adhesion as well. So
yep.
Because you can't get a textured PEI sheet 3x6. So mm-hmm. Feet.
Feet. Yes. Can we just
Three
clarify?
by 6 feet.
Let's just clarify for everybody that Adam has a 3x6 foot printer, which he built, which is awesome. So that's pretty. I've talked about your printer several times. I'm glad it came out of your mouth. Let's see. While you're here, let's just pick up some comments. Dale says some filaments you use a glue to protect the plate. An additive, please. An additive to protect the plate. Right. Protium says I used PVA on the cool plates as an interface layer always. I just never had an issue with the textured PEI. I've been very happy with the textured PEI. Blaker T, welcome aboard, sir. He says, I have had a lot of luck with textured PEI. My biggest issues with adhesion comes from a mix of poor auto leveling and not having an insulated enclosure. Yeah, so here, Adam, this is another thing that I lost sleep over. You have, and you talked about a well-heated enclosure for ABS. You have a plate which is predominantly steel, right? It's coated with the PEI. Then you have the mass of your print, which is predominantly whatever plastic, and they have different coefficients of thermal expansion. So if you have no enclosure, for example, or a bad, poor enclosure, you could end up having thermal expansion in the bed, or lack thereof, very different from the thermal expansion in the part, or lack thereof, which in my mind causes a print to want to release from the plate. You're getting a shearing action where it attaches to the plate. Is that a decent mental model of, and maybe even a case for why you should always have an enclosure?
I'm not convinced. I haven't thought about this too much, but I'm not convinced that you're seeing too much thermal expansion in the plate that's causing the delamination and the warping in the part. I believe it's just the cooling of the print that causes it to warp. So you kind of touched on it, but so I've printed ABS and ASA for almost my entire printing career of 15 or so years. I've gone down all these different paths. Keeping it hot, as hot as you can keep it, is always been the biggest thing for success. Right. If I have a part, small parts are easy because you can keep them warm. They absorb the heat from the bed themselves enough. Once you get into the bigger parts, you start getting away from the bed in Z is where you start ending up with issues in my experience. And always hot bed, as hot as you can get it, and no draft. Even if you can't heat the enclosure, no draft. I sound like a broken record. This is stuff that's all over the internet. But if you can get that thing like an oven, like all these printers that have active heating in chambers, those are the ones that pique my interest, is to be able to do stuff like that and end up with accurate prints. Everything I do is engineering based. I've only done a handful of novelty items over the years. So everything I do has to be accurate. So if I'm doing a part that's, when I say a big part, I'm talking something that's probably like 6 cubic inches or larger. Okay. Like, it's a good sized part. I will turn on the heated bed and I will let that printer sit for hours before I even start the print. And the X1Cs are great, where when I'm printing, I print at 110C on the bed. I think they go to 120, so hot. I'll turn it on to 110, and I'll do that right when I get up in the morning or something like that. And go get breakfast, chores, all that stuff. Let it heat, and then by the time I start to print, that printer will be 55, 60C in the chamber before I even start.
Yeah.
And that's how I get good results on on those high warping materials. Recently I've moved to ASA from ABS, which seems to be a little bit better in that aspect. You know, it's a little more lenient, but it's still very much there.
Cool. Well, thank you for your input. You know, you gave me examples in both directions, or helped me get examples in both directions this morning, as far as adhesion is concerned and PVA, but really what I'm hearing from you is that most of your time printing has been without any additives.
Yeah, the thing that made the biggest difference. So I was late to join the bandwagon, like the Bambu bandwagon. I didn't see a need. The printers I had were very reliable. They were closed source printers, you know, so there wasn't any tinkering and stuff like that. And they had glass beds, and I would always print with ABS slurry. So for any of those that were not familiar, which is just usually waste ABS support material or such, dissolved in acetone into a very, very thin liquid, like almost like warm vegetable oil, you know, like if you're cooking like that, like very thin, nice thin layer, you know, only talking like a few thousands on the bed, put it on with a 5-inch paint scraper, and that would yield phenomenal results. Like, I've had parts stick to that so well that it would actually curl the glass from the stress.
Whoa.
And we're talking eighth inch, whatever the technical term is, but Pyrex glass. Like, it would actually.
Is that a borosilicate? I think that's what that is.
Yes, that's it.
No.
Yeah, so if you pull that bed out of the printer and put it on the desk, it will actually curl off the desk. Like, that's how hard that's stuck on there. And then as soon as you...
Somebody in the chat says, smells horrible. Are you referring to Adam, or are you referring to the nano adhesive that was, I think...
I know what he's referring to. He's referring to the ABS slurry.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Awful. So
how would he know? I know how he knows.
You get really good results if you put it on onto a hot bed.
Yep.
But the acetone off gas is really bad.
Kyle says both. Jeff says, I have a 6-inch cube item I print in ASA, and even at 65C chamber, if I don't catch the end of the print to put the heater back on and it starts to cool too fast, I will get separation of layers. Wow. I have venting into the chamber which removes the heat too fast? ? Wow.
So
do you taper off
so
your
something
chamber?
I've noticed, something I noticed, that's a good point, is on the larger prints, I actually cover the ports, the rear vent port on the X1C, as well as the waste chute port. I'll use large format refrigerator magnets, you know, like,
yeah,
you know, ones they send you for like reminders and stuff like that. I'll put them on the back of the printer to cover over those extra holes.
That's a good trick,
because there is heat loss through there. Yeah. So, and like sometimes, you know, there's settings, and sometimes, you know, it'll turn on that exhaust fan if you missed it or something like that. I've had that ruin prints because it's dropped the temperature too much inside the chamber.
Okay, I'm going to ask you 2 quick questions. Can we pry the Bambu Lab juice out of your cold dead fingers, or are you totally in?
For the right application, it's perfect.
Okay.
So.
And how long will one of these last you?
I got my first one 2 years ago.
Okay. Dale says the same thing. It's like a 4-year supply at least. You probably lose it before you use it up. All right, Adam, thanks a lot. I got to keep moving here. I appreciate you chiming in.
No problem.
Catch you
Anytime.
later. All right. Awesome. Let's see. Thank you for your input, Jeff. That was quite the story. Anyway, so here we go. You have homework. Your homework is you can take your plate. You could wash your plate. You could alcohol your plate, and you could use a little bit of Kickapoo Joy Juice on your plate. Don't overdo it. And you can start adjusting for adhesion and release. And the solution, if you'll pardon the pun, the solution that you land on is going to be the right thing for your process. And I've figured out that there's no one answer, okay? I found a really good answer for the PETG on the textured PEI with just a little touch of this stuff, and it's just fantastic. But do some experimenting. And we will move on to the other topics here today. I will publish, by the way, this table that I showed, I will publish this in our Discord server. To the right of these columns is another column which contains the reference for where the data came from. So stay tuned for that. That will end up in the Discord server and elsewhere. And does anybody know how I generated that table? Anybody? Anybody want to guess how I generated that table? Evil says, I didn't. You are correct. I didn't generate that table. So I spent time with Chat something. Yes, with ChatGPT. So let's talk about ChatGPT. We'll get that out of the way. Oh, here's some more. Quentin says, this is what I use. The only downside of using a spray is that it gets on everything. So that's called, I think all of these products are basically PVA based. Somebody can prove me wrong. Somebody can show me a product that has that is not PVA based, and I'll be very interested to hear about it. Okay, so ChatGPT, let's talk about it. Yes, I did generate that table this morning from ChatGPT. Not it now. Before you get all excited, it took a good half hour to maybe I'd say a half an hour of work with ChatGPT to get to this table. Okay, this was not like trivial. This took work. And it's because it's not a panacea. It's not some robot somewhere that you say something to and it understands you and goes and does it and you're done. It is not. So the first thing, I'm going to try to transmit what I know about ChatGPT and its relatives to you so that you can understand how to use it and how not to use it. There's a term of art called LLMs. You'll hear it, large language models. And that's what ChatGPT is. There's another term of art called expert systems. That is not what ChatGPT is. An expert system, the simplest version of an expert system, you've actually seen before. It's called a PID controller. Now, you can make the argument that that's not a very complicated system, but it learns your system and it achieves a certain goal. Expert systems learn from how to do something by lots of data, and then they start doing it better and better and better, and they become what's called an expert system. Not what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT is what's called a large language model, and it has one job. Its job is you ask it a question, okay, and it gives you an answer, and the answer is the most, the paragraph of words you're going to get back. Every word is the most probable word after the previous words. In the simplest form, that's what an LLM is, large language model. So first thing you have to do, yeah, Proteum says it's a super fancy autocomplete. Yeah, I have my own take on that. I'll give it to you in a second. A large language model gets as its input as much of what you want it to be spewing back as possible. In our case, guess what? It's called the internet. So a large language model can literally load up as much data from the internet as possible, and it builds this I'm going to stay away from the details. It builds this database, neural network that we don't even understand, okay? But it's big, it's large, it's got a lot of nodes in it, such that it tweaks all those nodes until it would give you what the input data structure looked like if you asked it the question. So that's how it trained. It's called training data. The trouble is that when you approach the LLM, the large language model, on a Monday, you don't know if it was Sunday when it finished training or if it was 2 years ago Sunday that it finished training. That's one of the big problems. So it's not the expert. It is regurgitating information which sounds very definitive. I have proven that LLMs give you bad information proudly. Let me say that again. An LLM will happily and proudly and brightly and sprightly give you bad information. So one of the ways you can use the LLM to good use, but also avoid the pitfalls of getting bad information. I have a minor disagreement with you, Protium. I'll address that. Is by giving it what we call a default prompt or a preliminary prompt or a personalization prompt. So I'm going to show you mine. It's in development. It's a work in progress, and it has truly helped. Okay. First, let me address two things. Number one, Protium says it's completely non-deterministic too. Things like PIDs aren't. I would argue, sir, that it is deterministic, but the complexity is so great that we can't get our heads around it. We would call it chaotic, okay, which means it has determinism, but we can't grok it. And Quentin says it depends on the temperature setting. Yeah, okay, we're heading into a hole. So we all know somebody, think of a friend of yours who always finishes your sentences. Does everybody know somebody like that? Okay. That's how an LLM works. An LLM is that friend of yours that always finishes your sentences. So just think of that for a minute. Yeah. Protium says, if you don't know somebody like that, you're that person. Okay. So let me show you. Here is an example of a default prompt, which I think you're going to be able to see. I got to shrink something here a little bit. No, that's not what I want. Hang on. Computers, am I right? Okay. So I'm going to read you because I know a lot of guys are on audio. This is my default prompt. And I quote, when delivering the first response in a session, you will state, quote, greetings, Mr. Webb. The time is, then insert the current date and time zone, and then open, quote, ... or is it, question mark, close quote, and start a new paragraph. Before presenting information as fact, you will check with multiple sources. Strive to have at least 2 independent references. You should always cite your sources of information, always including the timestamp when that information was collected. When you use multiple sources, cite all of them. Include links to your sources when available. When providing URLs, please make them plain text that can be cut and pasted. If you are speculating, you will clearly identify it as such. If you need more information from me to answer my questions, ask for it. Accuracy will be rewarded. Whenever possible, state measurements in dual units, imperial and metric, with imperial as priority, as primary. Okay, that's my prompt. Let me go through it and tell you why I did what I did. First paragraph. When delivering the first response in a session, you will state, "Greetings, Mr. Webb. The time is," and then insert the time and the time zone and start a new paragraph. The purpose of that is so I know it is executing this prompt. Okay? It's not because I want to hear my name. The second part of that is when it says the time is and then inserts the quote, the current date and time, you find out pretty quickly that it has no idea. It is not like using your computer that knows what time it is. And that time varies all over the place, and it's fascinating. And that's now later models. I use ChatGPT, the model 4. Later models have a lot more interesting connections to real-time data and the web. Small models have zero connection, or could have zero connection. If you use some of the real small ones that can fit on a computer, they're not connected to real-time data, and it shows. Yeah, okay. I can't get to everybody's comments right now, but you guys are saying some interesting things. Okay, let's keep going. Next paragraph. Before presenting information as fact, you will check with multiple sources. Strive to have at least 2 independent references. Again, we're trying to get to fact-based information, and if you get a fact from an LLM that does not cite its references and that you don't check, it might be nonsense. Okay. Next paragraph, you should cite your sources of information, always including the timestamp when that information was collected. When you use multiple sources, cite all of them. That's been really helpful. So not only are you finding out where it's coming from, but you can see the timestamp. Some of the better models, the ones you pay for, like the ChatGPT 4, they have recent data, and it's good data from good sources, and it's recently collected. Other models, not so much. Include links to your sources when available. I actually had a bug in ChatGPT. When it put a link to the sources, it wasn't giving me a link. It thought it was giving me a link. I told it to give me a link, but it didn't give me a link. So then I said, make them plain text that can be cut and pasted, and that works better. I don't understand the bug. I did report it as a bug. If you are speculating, you will clearly identify it as such. I don't know if that has any value yet. If you need more information from me to answer my question, ask for it. Accuracy will be rewarded. I did some reading that indicated that things like, good job and rewarding the GPT actually matters. Okay. So that's what that's about. And then finally, whenever possible, state measurements in dual units. That's how I want it. I want dual units. So in ChatGPT, there's a place for what they call personalization, and then custom, or it's called customization, and then personalization. And there's a place to put this paragraph, this initial prompt in there, so that every time you open up a new session, it executes that prompt. And then you go ahead and ask it your question, and it does its thing. And of course, in my case, it will say, "Greetings, Mr. Webb." Now I know it's running my. If it doesn't say that, then I did something wrong probably, and it's not running my default prompt. In these ways, you could start to get useful information. So when I generated this table that we used earlier, I asked it a bunch of questions. I said, please cite examples of PVA being used as a release agent. Then I said, okay, now cite examples of it being used to improve adhesion. And I had to go back and forth a bunch of times. And then finally I said, okay, now make a table. Well, the first table it made only had about 5 filaments in it. So I went back and I said, okay, continue adding filaments. And it gave me basically what you see here, except then I said one more thing to it. I said, now go back to that table, and for each line, I want you to add the link to where the information came from, and it did. So I'm not showing it to you here just because it's not formatted well for the screen. But on my screen over here, I have a full spreadsheet. Every line has a link to its original information. I can check it. I can make sure it's not made up nonsense. It is entirely possible to get made up nonsense. Okay, let's see. So, yeah. So Kyle correctly says that asking for sources is helpful if you check them. But LLMs have also been known to hallucinate sources. For example, and this is a true story, the lawyer who famously submitted a brief from ChatGPT that had citations to cases that did not exist. Absolutely true. So the reason we're asking for references is so that we can check them. Okay, and Protium's recommending sim theory, and somebody else recommended another thing. Okay. The point being is that this is a useful tool if you use it correctly. It's like every tool in our shop. And if you use it incorrectly and you get garbage information, that's on you. Okay? It is not a miracle worker. It is not a human, and it is not an expert.
I am not an expert.
Except in this case, it really isn't an expert. It's dumb as a brick, but it could be useful. So we got useful information out of it today. This work was done by ChatGPT, but it wasn't done instantly. So that's if you have any questions on ChatGPT stuff, we started a conversation on the Discord server. I started a thread talking about some ChatGPT stuff. If there's sufficient interest, we'll put a channel in just for that. And by the way, I asked ChatGPT to improve my default prompt, and it gave me feedback. It said, "Yeah, I'd fix this and fix this and fix this." So you can use the tool to improve the tool if you're careful and check everything. Let's see. Chris O says Claude, Claude, has been real helpful for making custom programs that I use at work. By the way, ChatGPT and related LLMs are very good at coding. So again, you could say, "Hey, I have an ESP32 processor on an Adafruit Featherboard. Please write me a piece of code that does this, this, and this." And what you get back is about 75% correct, maybe even 80% correct. And it's so you get to the 80% point quickly, which could be valuable. And I'm hearing a lot of feedback from software people that it's a very good tool for starting on software projects. Yeah, Kyle says there's a feature in ChatGPT now where it will feed the response back into its context to think about what you're asking more deeply. So the models that you pay for, I think I pay $20 a month for ChatGPT on OpenAI, and it's worth it. And you get the fancier models and happy to pay it. Yeah. So play with it, but play with it smart, and ask other people who have gone down the road before you, and you'll be able to make some positive use out of it. And I hope you do. Okay. Last bit of information, and then we're gonna move on. I talked about the infrared sensors last week, and got some not pushback, but I got some information from my friend who couldn't be with us today, Doug, and I wanted to give you some of that feedback because Doug is a real expert in this kind of stuff. There's three terms of art that we only hit on one of them, and that was emissivity. Let me read you this paragraph really quick, and we'll talk about what some of these terms mean with respect to doing infrared imaging and temperature measurement. And of course, the reason that I got an infrared imager and thermal measurement device is because I'm doing a job in the lab where we're going to be pumping RF power into something, and we want to see where it gets dissipated and if it gets dissipated, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a paragraph that Doug sent me, and honestly, I'm not sure this is a quote from him or he grabbed it somewhere. It says, IR thermometers measure black body radiation. Although black is defined as absorbing all radiation, it turns out that black things also radiate as much as possible, so black things have the high absorptivity and high emissivity. That's why highly emissive things are described as good black bodies. Electromagnetic radiation interacts with objects in three ways: transmission, absorption, and reflection. To satisfy conservation of energy, the fractional values, that means 0 to 1, the fractional values of reflectance and transmittance and absorbance must sum to 1. Since absorbance and emissivity are equal, this means that things with low emissivity must be also highly reflective or transmissive. So I would argue that one has to be very careful when using IR to measure the temperature of things that have low emissivity, even if your IR thermometer allows you to compensate for that. Note also that from the standpoint of temperature measurement of things that aren't extremely hot, good black bodies often aren't black in the visible spectrum. White paint has an emissivity of close to 0.9, and the emissivity of water is close to 0.95. In the visible spectrum, these aren't black, but they are at the wavelengths emitted by a black body at normal temperatures. He goes on, this morning he added, my main point is, if you point your IR thermometer at something with low emissivity, you'll end up measuring the temperature of something else in the environment. It would be cool if you demonstrated that on the live by pointing your imager at something and then wave a hot thing around and show how shiny. Okay, so I actually did this. So that was a lot of words. They were very good words, and they were accurate words. Now let's do a quick demo. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture of a couple of things, and we'll take a look at what happens here. All right, here's a picture on your screen. Sorry if you're on audio, you're just gonna have to trust me on this. Yes, exactly right, Kyle, and we're going to show that. Okay, so sitting on my desk is a coin. This is the black thing right here, a dark thing right here, a plastic housing which has the textured PEI on the base, and a finger. Can you tell which of these things was the hottest? That's correct. It's my finger. Okay. And you can also see that on the black round thing, there's a rectangular thing. And on the big rectangular thing, there's a rectangular thing. Those are pieces of tape. And here's the actual things you're looking at. Okay. A plastic Gridfinity thing with a piece of tape on it, and a stainless steel laserable coin with a piece of tape on it. So if you look at this, it sort of makes sense. The color is the temperature. Don't worry about the exact number that's at the top of the screen. You could ignore that. The color is the temperature, and this piece of tape over here and this piece of tape over here are about the same color. However, the plastic thing is about the same color as the tape, but the coin is dark. Do you see that? So the coin is showing up as cold, but the coin is this shiny piece of stainless steel. So it has a low emissivity and a high reflectivity. Is that a problem? Well, let's see what it looks like in the next picture, and then you tell me what I changed. Okay, here's the next picture. You'll note that the piece of tape is visible here. The plastic is visible here. You can make the argument they're a little different. The finger is there, of course, and it's still hot. And look at the coin now. The coin is hot. Almost, you would argue that the coin is now as hot as my finger. Why? Okay, because we're looking at the reflection in the coin of my screen, my computer screen, which is hot. So I can get fooled by looking at this reflection of this infrared source in a shiny, high reflectivity, low emissivity thing. The second thing you've learned is that this piece of tape has a certain a certain high emissivity, and that tape could solve some problems. That tape is really complicated. It's Scotch magic tape that happened to be sitting on my desk, but it's got a dull feature and it's made out of plastic. Kyle says, a lot of things. You can easily change the emissivity of an object by placing a high emissivity object on top, as long as it's a good conductor of heat. Right. And that's what my piece of tape is. And what I hear from others, no, Evils, I do not. What I hear from others is that people who do this for a living, Dale knows guys that go around and take infrared measurements of bearings, okay, as part of their job. They have special tape that they put on the bearings, and they read off the tape. And it's a certain tape, and it's always the same, etc. Now, if I wanted to get really accurate about this, I would take something that I want to measure the temperature of, or something that represents something that I want to take the temperature of. I would tape a thermocouple down to the surface so that I have an actual thermocouple temperature measurement. And then I would maybe even use the same piece of tape, and then I would take the measurement off of that. So now I'm doing a simultaneous infrared measurement and thermocouple measurement, and I get a correction factor. And then I can go off and use my standard piece of tape on my bearing housing and take the measurement again, and now I'm calibrated. And there's formulas for that, which I'm not going to dwell on. It's probably proportional to the absolute temperature as measured in Kelvin. So I guess that's the point, is that you got several things here. You got transmission. Now, and we're not really dealing with very transmissive things, but if you have a white piece of plastic or a piece of LDPE or, a piece of glass, it's transmissive, very transmissive. If you, and again, you got to think in infrared. You can't think in visible. So you have the magic number, the magic words. I'm just going to read you the exact words here so I don't get it wrong. Transmission, absorption, and reflection. And absorbance and emissivity are equal. So we can get deeper into this, but I just wanted to point out that there's no panacea. It's not that easy. And the fact that my two infrared thermometers, the fancy one and the not fancy one, didn't quite agree was largely in part due to these processes. Adam says, what setting would you use when grilling a steak? I don't use temperature when I grill a steak. I use, I palpitate the steak. I hit it. So, sorry. Wrong. You asked the wrong guy. Robin says, flat black spray paint? ? Hi, Robin. So Robin last week pointed out that black Sharpie is sort of a go-to. Flat black spray paint probably is a good thing. I think the most important thing is that you do the same thing every time and that you calibrate it. And Kyle has a very good point. He says, with infrared, it's very important to keep in mind you're measuring the infrared radiation of an object. You can't see through objects. The illusion of seeing through things is thermocoupling. I think Kyle's done this before. Do you think Kyle's done this before? I think Kyle's done this before. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. I think I showed you all the, oh, you got, okay, Carl, hang on. Carl Tauber, you're on the air. Rhode Island, hello.
Yeah, quick question. You were complaining about your infrared thermometers last week.
Yes.
Sort of flashing numbers, and you were saying we need a time constant.
Yes.
And I can't remember how many time constants do you have to wait before you have a reliably settled number?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If I had my druthers and Fleer, are you listening, Fleer? Are you paying attention, Fleer? I'm going to answer Carl's question with a request. If I had my druthers, I would have an option to average that temperature number one. Number two, I would have a control on the time constant. So if I have a 5-second time constant and I wait, I think the answer to your question is, if I wait 6 time constants, I'm down to parts per million, roughly.
Yeah, that was my understanding. You need somewhere between 4 and 6 time constants to get a
right. And I would like Fleer to give me the control that says, okay, average over this time constant. Let me choose the time because it's too jumpy. And I think my Fluke, one pixel thermometer, I think they do a really good job. I mean, it's not jumpy. It's also less accurate, probably has less resolution. I don't care. But a human staring at a screen that's seeing 10-degree jumps bouncing around, it's not useful. And if I have to get my phone out and then run their app to do that averaging, it's more work, So, yeah, good point. Thank you, Carl.
Now, the other point that I wanted to make is his comment that you can't use those thermometers on low emissivity objects. I think the point is that if you have something that is very low emissivity, you're not getting any energy out of it. So essentially, the radiation that the sensor needs in order to make a calculation is just not there.
And that's when you invoke the tape trick or the Sharpie trick.
You invoke something.
Yes.
And I would defer to Robin on what's the most reliable, easy way of doing that, because he's done the experiment.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Yeah, I've heard.
That's all I've got.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. You're a gentleman. I've heard black electrical tape. I just did this quick test with the tape sitting on my desk, and it proved to be effective, whether it's the best thing or not. But you have to do something, and I think that's Carl's point. However, if you're just looking for where's the hot thing, as long as you recognize that if you're pointing at shiny things, you might be seeing a reflection, it's a pretty useful tool. And one of the things I'm going to look at is where's the hot things on my grinder. Like, we have a column. This is the thing we care about, and we care about the column growing. Okay, I think we did it. we went a little long today, but there were a lot of things to cover, and I appreciate you guys. Kyle, you were right there with lots of expertise. Thank you very much. Robin checked in. Thank you, sir. Adam Brunette, thank you for joining us. Carl Tauber, thank you for joining us. I appreciate all you guys. Did I miss anyone? We'll see you guys next week. I hope everybody has an outstanding, productive week. I know I plan on doing that. And if you have new insights into the use of build plate additives, please join our Discord and post the information so that everybody else can learn. As far as PFG Stones, I want to say thank you to, it was a crazy week for orders. And there's some specials and some out of stock things that are coming. We're fully out of stock on the minis, and I have a specials order on the minis. So really this next week, we will start on minis. So if your order has 4-inch minis in it, that's why it might take a couple more days or a week to get out the door. Everything else was in stock. Everything else is that isn't just minis is either shipped or sitting in a box downstairs ready to ship. And if you're looking for something to make something flat or keep something flat, go to pfgstones.com. For product information, go to pfg.gg/stones, and that's the product information page. We had some very interesting discussions this week about the use of the products and where conditioning came from and all that stuff. It's all on the website. And I just recently updated it, by the way, with a pointer to Silo's Garage. Thank you very much, Silo's Garage. He did an awesome video, which is now linked on the product information page. And we basically dug up the origins of rubbing two stones together to condition them. And that was because of Silo's doing an interview with, correct me if I get the name wrong, Mel Liebert of Precision Instrument Company. And that is now cited on the product information page along with the video. Awesome. Guys, have an awesome week. We'll see you. Very important. There will not be a PFG Live next week or the week after. We're off for 2 weeks because of holidays. PFG Live is off for 2 weeks because of holidays. I'll do a post on Instagram to that effect also. Okay? Get flat, stay flat, and we'll see you guys really soon. Take care.